Due to global openings of economies and global changes taking place, companies are not competing with local people, but are competing with international players, even though it is competing in terms of ordinary products. Therefore, manufacturing world-class products at competitive prices, using best possible technology and competitive people becomes very important. If companies do not have competitive people and not know how to get the best out of them, it becomes very expensive. They are not able to use best technology and not introduce cost effectiveness. Today, it is very important to have competitive people and best technology, and hence performance management becomes very critical. In this context, many organizations in India and other countries have started to revisit performance management system and lay renewed interest on performance management. There are two CDs. One talks about performance management and the second CD talks about key performance areas. The purpose of these series is to get an overall idea about performance management. What is it? What does the process involve? The limitation, the advantages, the points to keep in mind during implementing these processes, etc. The viewer should be able to gain an idea as to how this aspect is important in any company and the reasons as to why it is important. In the first CD, Performance Management, the importance of performance management, what is it, what are the objectives, why are they needed, and its components have been discussed. This series also shows 4 case studies taken from well-known and reputed companies that have implemented the performance management process. And this process has been successful in these companies. This will give an idea of how performance management process is implemented, what are the things to keep in mind, problems faced, along with the lessons given for implementing the process. In the end of the CD, an interview session has been presented to outline the points that we should keep in mind during implementation phase, the pitfalls, and what happens if an organization does not have performance management. Hence, viewing this CD should provide a complete detail of performance management and the role it plays in organizations today. Dr. T.V. Rao is currently the chairman of T.V. Rao Learning Systems. Professor Rao has been working in this area for the last 25 years. He started work in Larsen and Toubro and worked with over 50 different countries in India and abroad. He has also worked as an HRD and OD consultant to many organizations in India and abroad. Professor Rao has worked at the Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, as a professor for over 20 years. He has authored and co-authored several books in management, particularly in organizational behavior, entrepreneurship, health and population, education management, performance appraisals, and HRD. In order to gain more knowledge on performance management, books can be consulted. There are 5 books on performance management which are available and can be obtained by writing to TVRLS. The following slide will show you the details.
What is performance management? Performance management is managing continuous improvements in performance at individual level, group level, as well as organizational level. And these improvements are on all aspects of performance and not merely in terms of 1 or 2 aspects. Why do we have to manage performance? We need to manage performance if you have to survive in a competitive world. In a competitive world, organizations are required to produce goods and services which are of quality and provide them at a speed and at low cost. So providing goods and services at speed and with low cost requires use of good technology, as much of less manpower as possible, and systems, and on the top of all of these, certain amount of cost consciousness. Also, performance management is required in order to establish high performance organizations. If you want to establish a high performing organization which lasts forever, you need to have good systems of performance management. In addition to all this, performance management involves putting your people to best use. In the past, we talked about performance appraisal and not so much about performance management. Today, we are talking of performance management because what is important in appraisals is performance and not just the ratings, form of objectives of a performance management system. A good performance management system can help us achieve the following objectives. It can help us to clarify roles and fix accountabilities. It can help us to integrate individual goals with the departmental or group goals and organizational goals. It can also help us to appropriately use the competencies of individuals. It can help in reducing the wastage and overheads through focused work and use of competencies. And it helps in continuous performance improvements through planning and review. It also serves the purpose of competency building at individual level, at group level. It's a good tool for culture building, and it is a good tool for achieving a sense of direction among all the employees. I'd like to now move on to describe what are the components of a good performance management system. If a performance management system has to achieve all the objectives we have talked earlier, it should have some of the following components. Performance management means 5 things. Number 1, performance planning. Number 2, performance analysis. Number 3, performance review. Number 4, performance development. And number 5, performance rewarding, appraisal and reinforcement. Let me go one by one to talk about why performance planning and why performance analysis, why performance development, and why performance reinforcement. Number 1, there should be some form of identification of accountabilities. Normally we say that accountabilities are to be identified and set through something like key performance areas. Some people use the term key result areas, key responsibility areas, and others use the term tasks and targets, and yet some other people use terms like key function areas, goals, etc. It doesn't matter, in my opinion, what is the term that you use. Ultimately, when you use this particular kind of a component, every individual should have a well thought out annual, half-yearly or a quarterly plan of his own kind of a work. The individual should know how he is going to be spending time and what are the results that he is going to achieve as a consequence of various activities he has undertaken. The individual also should know what are the kind of expectations that his boss or his seniors have from him. Of course, he should also know the expectations of his subordinates. So the component of KPAs deals with some kind of a work planning and includes all the kind of things I have talked about. The second important component in performance management system is identification of competencies, attributes or qualities that are required to be exhibited by the individual on his job. Some companies have these qualities identified level-wise, some others department-wise, and yet a few other companies say that we do not differentiate between levels and include only a list of qualities across all levels. That is, this list that they include is same at all levels. The third most important component of performance management system is some form of self-appraisal. It is ultimately the individual who has to take charge of his performance. If the individual has to take charge of his performance, he should have a good say in terms of what he wants to do and also a good say in terms of how he has been able to accomplish and what are the various things that have helped him in doing whatever he has done and what are the things that prevented him from doing better. All this we put under self-appraisal. Another term that we use for self-appraisal is performance analysis. Performance analysis is really a process that is adopted by the individual to self-analyze or self-appraise for the foregone quarter or 6 monthly period or an annual period. In performance analysis, he first establishes the level of his accomplishments in relation to the various key performance areas or in relation to the various attributes or qualities that were identified and mentioned in the performance appraisal format in the beginning of the year itself. And after looking at these, he establishes the extent to which he has exhibited these and identifies the factors that have helped him to achieve whatever he has achieved and the factors that have prevented him from doing better. This is what is called as self-appraisal or performance analysis. Sometimes the performance analysis is also used as a tool by his senior before conducting the performance review discussion. That brings us to the fourth important component of performance management system, and that is the performance review discussion. Every once in a quarter or 6 monthly period, the appraiser and appraisee should sit together and review the performance of the appraisee. In doing this, they should use performance analysis as an aid. In analyzing the performance, they should identify the factors that have helped and the factors that have prevented the appraisee from doing better. Some of these factors may deal with the appraisee himself or herself. Some others may deal with the appraiser and a few others with the subordinates of the appraisee. And yet, some other factors may deal with organizational facilitating factors or inhibiting factors like lack of material, lack of availability of the raw material, lack of availability of finances, lack of availability of right kind of equipment to work on, and things of that nature. All these can be considered as organizational facilitators or constraints. And of course, there are always a few which are beyond the control of the organization. These are the chance factors. In a good performance analysis, we identify the extent to which the individual mattered, his boss mattered, his subordinates mattered, the company policies and organizational support matters, and the environment mattered. That is the performance analysis which is used in the performance review discussion. At the end of the performance review discussion, which normally should last about 1.5 to about 2 hours, sometimes it could be 3 hours, the appraiser and appraisee should become wiser about their own performance and should have identified what are the improvements they want to make on the basis of the last 3 or 6 months or annual kind of an experience they have had. This is the fourth component of performance management system, and then the fifth component, and that is where an assessment given by the appraiser comes into picture. But before the assessment, if you like, you can introduce another component of the performance management system, that is identification of developmental needs. Now, normally we have taken a stand in the past that developmental needs should be identified at the time of performance planning itself, because you do not want to wait till the end of the year or till the end of the quarter to identify developmental needs. Because what happens if you identify developmental needs at the end of the year, normally it takes about 2 to 3 months to have a performance review discussion and another month to pass on the identified developmental needs to the HR or personnel department, and another 2 months of time for the training department to tabulate it, and by the time a training program is organized, 1.5 years have lapsed from the time of feeling the developmental need. So nowadays we say, for heaven's sake, don't identify developmental needs at the end of the performance appraisal period, but identify them in the beginning of the performance appraisal period itself. If you can do it, it's wonderful. If you can't, at least do it at the end of the first quarter. So thus, identification of developmental needs becomes a very important component of the performance management system. The next component of the performance management system is an assessment given by the appraiser. He assesses its immaterial, whether you use a 10-point scale or a 15-point scale or a 7-point scale. I normally recommend a 10-point scale because the larger the width of the scale, the better and more objective it will be. At least I think there is scope for differentiating people. In fact, of course, nowadays I have been promoting ratingless appraisals. If you are a very mature organization, you don't reduce the entire year's work of an individual to a number. I would strongly recommend an organization considering qualitative way of looking at performance rather than reducing the annual work of an individual to a number and comparing the uncomparables. I can't imagine comparing a number 5 generated from finance department with that of a number 5 generated from materials department with that of a number 5 generated from the personnel department and so on. I think it makes no sense, especially when appraisals differ and the departments differ, level of competence differs, and the number of years of work of an individual in that particular department varies. It doesn't make sense to reduce a number and leave it to the personnel department to equate all these numbers. Most of our problems in performance appraisals lie in this particular kind of a thing. However, it is easily said than done, because most organizations would like to have performance ratings as mechanisms of rewarding employees. Well, it is your ordeal if you want to do it. If you want to do it, my recommendation is have a 10-point scale on each of the KPA. You might like to weigh the KPAs. You might also like to weigh the attributes. There is another important component of the performance management system. If you are going for a system which is linked with rewards, or a system where performance needs to be monitored, then I would strongly recommend a component, and that component is using some kind of a performance review committee to moderate the ratings and assessment given by the immediate reviewing officer or reporting officer. And the final important component of the performance management system is the action to be taken by the HRD department. The HRD department should take some action on developmental needs identified by the individual, as well as performance ratings and recommendations given by the boss, and communicate to the appraiser and preferably also to the appraisee whatever decisions they have been able to take on the appraisal ratings and developmental needs, recommendations and things of that nature. I think this is a very, very important component of the performance appraisal or performance management system. Thus, a good performance management system has all these components, and when you have all these components, you can achieve good culture of performance planning, good culture of role clarity and fixing accountabilities, and a good culture of performance development and building lasting kind of organizations. Alright, for this particular kind of a series, we will stop here, and in the next series, we will go into the details of what is performance planning and how to do performance planning through identification of key performance areas and things of that nature. Thank you.